Hi, I'm Justin Gunther, curator of buildings and collections here at Fallingwater, and I'm going to walk you around the grounds to show you Fallingwater's outdoor sculpture collection. The first piece of sculpture you'll encounter is Bear Run 1. It's by the artist Bryan Hunt, American-born artist. It was commissioned in 1979 by Edgar Kaufman Jr. for this spot, and it's meant to immediately connect you with the waterfall of Bear Run, being a stylized waterfall in bronze. On the wall of the plunge pool you'll discover Jacque Lipchitz, mother and child. Jacque Lipchitz said that the image of this sculpture came to him in his subconscious, and it was his reaction to the atrocities of World War II. And you can kind of see the anguish in the mother's face. Her child is wrapping its arms around her neck. Kind of a neat story about this sculpture. This is the only casting of the mother and child from the original mold. The actual mold was destroyed in a fire in Lipchitz's studio in New York, so this is the only survival from the original mold. And also, you always hear stories about Frank Lloyd Wright controlling the placement of artwork in his creations. The original placement for this sculpture was actually a 180-degree turn, so the mother actually would have had her arms stretching out up towards the house as if she was paying homage to the architecture. And there was a flood here in the 1950s that knocked the sculpture into the stream. And when the Kaufmans replaced the sculpture, instead of having the arms up facing the house, they thought there was a bit more humility in facing the sculpture up towards nature and paying respect to the nature that inspired the architecture. On the west terrace of the living room, you'll find an Indian casting of a Buddha head. We don't know much about this bronze piece, other than that it came to the Kaufman Sculpture Collection in 1951. But it does have a nice sense of serenity that gives you pause to appreciate the sculpture and also the architecture and the landscape. When you get up close to the sculpture, you'll notice it has two imperfections. There are holes in its head that are actually flaws from the casting process. We're up on the third floor terrace of Fallingwater outside of Edgar Kaufman Jr.'s sleeping alcove, and we're looking at what a lot of visitors think is Fallingwater's TV antenna, but in actuality it was a piece commissioned by the Kaufmans for Fallingwater by Joseph Goto in the early 1950s. Goto was a Hawaiian-born artist who actually moved to Pittsburgh for a while and taught at Carnegie Mellon. But the piece is meant to symbolize a balance between city and country life on the left, and then city life cantilevered out on the right, the vertical elements emulating buildings. The sculpture is also cantilevered to mimic the cantilevers of Fallingwater. Scattered around the outside of the main house and guest house are four works by Mardonia Magna. They're all cut from single blocks of stone and wood in very indigenous forms. Mardonia Magana was one of the artists that emerged from the Mexican Revolution, who was returning to doing more traditional Mexican art forms. He was regarded by Diego Rivera as the best contemporary Mexican sculptor at that time. He was also collected pretty extensively by Frida Kahlo. And the Kaufmans learned of Mardonia Magana through their connections with Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo, and because of their interest in Latin American art. As you ascend the step canopy, you'll come across Rose McClendon. This sculpture was done by the African-American artist Richmond Barthe in the 1930s. Rose McClendon was the first lady of the theatrical stage, African-American first lady of the stage in the 20s and 30s. She was on the original cast of Porgy and Deep River, and with this sculpture, what Barthe was trying to do was really capture the essence of her personality and her spirituality, and in the prayerful pose that she's in, I think he's successful in capturing that. The final piece of sculpture is by Peter Volkos. It was done in 1955, and it's actually a wheel-thrown ceramic piece. Each of these pieces are wheel-thrown and then stacked around the central core to create the composition. The piece was done in 1955. It's called Funiculated Smog. Well, thank you for joining me on this tour of the outdoor sculpture collection here at Fallingwater. If you'd like more information on the artwork in Fallingwater, you can visit www.fallingwater.org.